Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I have my video talking about how we should not judge certain books by their covers. I got this video idea from Patrick Leo, who did this video a couple weeks ago, talking about these amazing, excellent stories that are within books that really just don't have good covers. And I'm going to talk about those books. I have 6 on my list. They're mostly science fiction fantasy, but I do have one horror book. And actually, I'm going to kick it off with my horror book, and that is Extreme Makeover by Dan Wells. This is a book about these people who are trying to make a kind of ointment, this kind of makeup, basically, that goes on your face that makes you look younger. That's the whole point of this kind of makeup line. However, they end up messing up some of the genetics behind it, and it actually causes inadvertent cloning, and it causes people to swap. Basically, their bodies turn into the bodies of other people, basically, and it just totally messes up society, and society completely devolves into this chaotic craziness. And it is a masterful horror novel, and it is messed up in a lot of ways, but it is really enjoyable. But the cover, I just think the cover is just not good. Since I've read the book, I completely understand why the cover is chosen. There's stuff with the makeup look to it. There's the person. You can kind of make the outline of a body, and then there's the DNA strand at the bottom. So it's like you can kind of make it out, but it really does not. I don't think it stands out properly. I don't see people seeing this cover and saying, I want to pick up this book because of that. And by the way, for any of these books that I talk about, if you think they have amazing covers, what are you talking about? Let me know that, because I'd be curious to see if other people agree or disagree with me on this. But I just think this looks really bad as a cover. And then also the back of the book, especially when it has like information like a plot about the book. You may not be able to tell here, but it's super unreadable because it's that white text on a pink outline with black dots throughout, and because that's supposed to be the person and the DNA, the problem is it makes it really difficult to read. You have to strain to read it, and it's very, very difficult. And so I can't imagine that this was a good marketing tactic. And this is from Tor Books, by the way. So I really love this book, but it's just, I don't think the cover's that great. Next, I'm going to talk about a series that I really love. I read this series a couple years ago, and that is the Circle series by Ted Dekker. I'm specifically talking about the first book, Black. I couldn't show you all the books, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to show you the first one. So basically, this cover is cover is green except for the word of the title, which is the word black, and there is reasoning why this title is this way, and it looks like this is maybe an ocean of some sort or a lake of some sort in the green part. Anyway, this is a blend series. I would describe this as both fantasy and political thriller blended together. There's a man who is being chased by some loan sharks, and he ends up hitting his head, and he ends up being transported to this fantastical place with giant bats and other elements, and anytime he goes to sleep in one world, he wakes up in the other, and so he keeps throughout the book going back and forth, and the fantasy world is set in the future, and so he's able to get information about the past, and he learns about how Earth basically devolves in the future, and he's trying to stop that because of the knowledge he has when he falls asleep and goes into the fantasy world. And this is very much, I would say, very much a Christian series, very much Christian themes and Christian references to the Bible and stuff like that. But it is just as a fantasy story, it's just so creative and so interesting. And as like a thriller, it's just super fast-paced, and I was hooked on this series, and I don't think the cover is that good. I don't think the cover conveys what's going on in the series. I don't think the cover necessarily attracts new readers. Maybe I'm wrong on this one, but it just seems like they should have put more of something. Now, this I would use this as, this is like, when I remember this cover a lot because it's, I would say, iconic, because it does something that's not normally done, which is to have the word as the color, and then the background is a different color, but still it just it just doesn't strike me as a solid cover for me. And if they had put maybe like a blend where you see like half the cover is like real life stuff and political thrillery and the other half is fantasy, that would have been cool. But that's not the direction that the art department. This is a Tyndale book that Tyndale decided to go. No, not Tyndale. I'm sorry, Tommy Nelson, not Tyndale. Tommy Nelson. So anyway, let's move on to my next book I'm going to talk about. This is part of a trilogy, and this is the Poppy War trilogy. Super popular on BookTube. Excellent storytelling here. I am not a grimdark person, yet occasionally I'll enjoy some grimdark stories, and this is a grimdark story. This is basically about it's set in like a fantasy world that's meant to be China during some of Chinese wars during history. So it's very much historically based, but there's it's called the Poppy War because there's these poppies that are basically drugs that cause characters to be able to either have, not necessarily special powers, but abilities to commune with gods, kind of. And it's about this one girl who has to fight in the war and go on a bunch of different adventures, but they're really dark adventures. And I really enjoy the book, but this cover, it's just not thorough or detailed. It just feels like you have the words with the kind of misty looking stuff, and then you have the person with the arrow. Which that drawing isn't terrible, the person with the arrow, but it's just not a solid one in my book. So I think that this cover could have been better. At least I will say this and the other series that I talked about, the Circle series, are consistent throughout. So at least it's consistent covers. Next, I'll talk about a standalone novel, a fantasy standalone novel, which I love this novel, one of my favorite fantasy novels, and that is Eyes of Silver by Michael Stackpole. I loved reading this book. This is also a book deeply rooted in European and Asian history, and it's got such great themes about religion. It's got such great themes about the military and about government rule and about basically crusades and all that stuff. And also, it's just got some fun magic system stuff in it. This cover, although, is just so bizarre because the way it shows the characters, it almost looks like a cheesy romance cover in some ways, and also looks like a cheesy fantasy movie cover. And it doesn't convey the grandness or the quality of the writing, in my opinion. And I think that this book probably turned down a lot of readers. A lot of people may have seen this cover and been like, I'm not going to buy this. And I think that they have reissued the book like as an ebook with different covers, and I think those are even worse. So if they had kept the concepts of this cover with like the knight and the person and the woman and the kind of desert looking type stuff with the mountains, I think you could have kept that if you just changed the style a little bit. And on the back of the cover is one of the flying ships from the book, which is a genius design. And it's like, why didn't you make that part of the cover? I mean, that would have just been great. So anyway, that's one of the books I'm talking about. Next, I'm talking about a book series by Kevin J. Anderson titled The Saga of the Seven Sons. And I'm actually going to hold up two different books because the first 4 books were published by Warner Aspect. And so this is what the covers looked like. And this is actually a pretty cool cover, pretty nice science fiction cover. It's not the most amazing cover I've seen, but this painting is just gorgeous. And it conveys this sense of epic scale and beauty and science fiction to it. So I really liked this cover. But after book 4, I don't know whether Warner Aspect was bought out by Orbit or whether Orbit bought the rights to the series. But regardless, books 5, 6, and 7 of the series were published by not 5, 6, and 7, just 6 and 7, I think. Books 6 and 7 were published by Orbit. And so Orbit completely changed the cover design. And they also reissued the series. So if you want new copies of the series, you can't find this version anymore. If you want new copies of the series, you have to get this version, which is just basically a picture of a planet, and each book in the series is basically a picture of a planet or a moon or something, or a star or something. And it's just, why on earth would you make it so boring? yeah, we know it's science fiction. This is the cover I would expect on a textbook about space, on an astronomy book. This is not the cover of a grand science fiction space opera series, and so I think a lot of people would be more interested in the series if they had cover art closer to this. I'm not saying Orbit had to use the original. They could have designed another painting, but don't just go with the completely bland and boring cover of just a planet on there. I mean, planets are cool, but not for covers like this. So anyway, that's a frustration I have. And finally, I have another Kevin Anderson book, but this is from a different publisher. This is from Tor, and this is a fantasy series, the Wake of the Dragon series. And the first book, Spine of the Dragon, it's just basically the scales of a dragon and a sword, and the words Spine of the Dragon on there. And this cover truly feels like it was like an algorithm that they basically thought, hey, let's see, like, okay, what do we need in fantasy? We have dragons in this, let's put the dragon scales on there. You have to have a sword on a fantasy cover, so we're just going to plop a sword in there. And the series is somewhat consistent. And for this one, I am going to show books 2 and 3 real quick, because book 2 has the exact same issue of just being basically the scales of the dragon and the word Vengewar. And then you have the third book, which actually shows the head of the dragon. Now, I will say, to its credit, this third cover is pretty cool. I love this third cover. I think this is actually really cool. But this is book 3 of the series. Books 1 and 2, particularly 1, have to hook you. And book 1 is just such a boring cover. It's just so boring. And it doesn't really convey the grandness of this series. This series is, if I would describe this as Game of Thrones if it was faster paced, tighter, and had more fantasy elements to it, had more fantastical, stuff to it. But it feels like a Game of Thrones type series. You don't necessarily get that from this, and it's just I'm just so frustrated by the fact that this publisher did this, because this series is not a bestseller by any means. It's not one of his well-known series, but I think it's one of his best. It's so entertaining. I loved reading this series. I loved it, and I feel like the publisher just set it up for failure by giving it such a boring cover. So that is those are my 6 books that I say don't judge the book by the cover, because the book itself is, in my opinion, amazing, or at least really good, and the cover is just not. So let me know, first of all, have you read any of these? Did you like any of these books? Second of all, do you agree with my assessment that these are not great covers? And then third, do you have any that you would put on this list? Books that are really excellent but don't have great covers that you think should be included. Let me know all those thoughts in the comments section down below. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.